What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is the part 1 of a story where Izuku became the Shadow Monarch. Nothing could have prepared Izuku for his first meeting with the number 1 pro hero All Might. Being born quirkless in a society where 80% are blessed with quirk and the rest 20% are quirkless, he was unlucky enough to be part of those small group. Rejection and humiliations was all Izuku knew from the age of 4, as everything he had wanted was stripped away from him. His friendship with his childhood friend had dwindled until it became a bully and victim relationship. People had low expectation of him. Due to being quirkless overall, his life was not really good. His only saving grace was his kind mother Midoriya, his youngest sister and his idol All Might, but with the rejection of even All Might himself, what could this world offer to him anymore? Although he might not become a pro hero like he had planned, he will become something even greater, as he will be hired to be part of a special task force called Hunters. Their main objective is to slay monsters that threaten their way of life, and ironically, the quirkless had proven that there were not just some deadweight, as they are the only ones capable of entering the dungeon. With the power of the system and Shadow Monarch, he will rise to the top, quickly becoming something far greater than even All Might himself, as he will be recognized as a national hunter, and along the way he will fall in love with a kind swordswoman. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more information. Now, let's get into part 1. Chapter 1. The Abyss. Nothing could have prepared Izuku for the day when he met the symbol of peace and number 1 pro hero All Might. Standing in front of the man he idolized for years overwhelmed him with both excitement, admiration with a little nervousness. It was just a few minutes ago that a slime villain had attacked him with the intention of taking over his body for the purpose of escaping authority, and most importantly, to escape All Might, who had been chasing the villain all over the city after his failed attempt of robbery and assault. He couldn't express how terrifying the experience was for him. After all, the slime villain method of taking over was a lot more disgusting and painful, as he inserted himself through the mouth and forced his way through the windpipe, essentially blocking his airway, almost giving the green-haired boy a slow death by suffocation, which was not the best way to go out after just being told to take a swan dive of the roof of the building by his former childhood friend Katsuki Bakugo. Luckily, All Might was in the nick of time as he launched a Texas Smash, releasing a powerful gust of wind that forcefully removed the villain and saved the green-haired boy, although he had fainted afterwards due to the rush of air returning to his windpipe and the adrenaline calming down. He had woken up shortly by a light slap to his cheeks, which brought us back to where we started. He was standing in front of his idol, and he was freaking out like he always did as he scrambled back in both shock, with his eyes spinning around, unable to fathom the fact that he was face to face with the big man himself. If he was being honest, his first meeting with his idol was quite pathetic. He was freaking out and scrambling around like a lost puppy. The pro hero didn't seem to be fazed by the boy's reaction, already expecting it. "I'm glad you're okay," exclaimed All Might, feeling relieved that the boy seemed to be quite energetic after being at the receiving end of his Texas Smash. "Sorry about getting you caught up in my villain fighting. I don't usually make mistakes like this, but I was in high spirits on my day off in a new place," explained All Might before he let out his signature laugh, "but you were a big help. Thanks." The number 1 expressed his gratitude towards the green-haired boy, who was in the process of fainting. He then grabbed 2 bottles of soda that were in his cargo pants, as he displayed the villain being stuffed inside the soda, although from the villain's reaction, he was suffering quite a lot from having his body separated. "I captured him safely. The number 1 hero. All Might. He's the real thing. He looks completely different in person," thought Izuku loudly as he then remembered his notebook as he frantically looked around. "Oh, right. An autograph. Where should I?" asked Izuku as he frantically searched for himself before he found his hero notebook lying on the ground, still having the mark of his friendship with Bakugo. "In that notebook," said Izuku as he opened the book only to find the All Might signature written, which took over 2 pages. "He already did," exclaimed Izuku loudly, freaking out. As he stood up, bound to All Might for what appears to be 1,000 times, almost hitting his head as well on the concrete floor. "Thank you very much. It'll be an heirloom. A family treasure," exclaimed Izuku frantically as the pro hero gave his signature smile and a thumbs up. "Okay. Well, exclaimed All Might, crouching as he is ready to jump in the air to depart from the neighborhood. That put a stop to Izuku's excitement as he became sad. "Wait, already?" said Izuku, already wanting to ask the question that has been haunting him for years, and All Might was his only chance to finally renew his will and give a meaning to everything he had done so far. "Pros are constantly fighting enemies in time," said All Might as he continued stretching his muscles to take a leap to the air. Izuku didn't want the man to leave as he tried to reach his hands towards him. "Wait. There are still things I want to ask," thought Izuku as the man stopped stretching. Not looking at the boy who was trying to reach him, he gave his last goodbye. "Well then, I'm counting on your continued support," shouted All Might as he leaped into the air, creating a gust of wind where he previously stood. Wait, said All Might, realizing that there was an extra weight on both his legs. Looking down, he saw the green-haired boy latching on both his legs. The air was going through his eyes and mouth as the man frowned. Hey, 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 hey. Let go of me. Your fanaticism is too much, said All Might as he tried to push the boy off him, not realizing that they were pretty much flying in the air. If I let go now, I'll die, said Izuku through the amount of air that was going through his mouth as All Might stopped trying to remove him as he realized the current situation. That's true, said All Might as Izuku, who was still not used to being high in the air, had a hard time getting his words out. I have a lot of things I want to ask you directly, said Izuku, although it was painful for All Might to watch Izuku's current state. Okay, I get it, so close your eyes and mouth, said All Might as the boy buried his face onto his cargo pants as All Might brought his left hand onto Izuku's back, securing him to his legs, although he couldn't hide his cough as he covered his mouth with his right hand, hiding the trickle of blood that was seeping from his mouth. Shit, thought All Might as he realized that he had hit his limit, landing on the roof of a building with a large thud. Luckily nobody had noticed as the place was quiet and had not many people walking around. Izuku was shaking as he realized how close he was to death, as his lips were dried and hair was disheveled and eyes were white pale. That was scary, expressed Izuku, his reckless yet near-death experience. All Might had his back turned towards the boy, quite displeased to say the least. Good grief. If you talk to the people downstairs, I'm sure they'll let you down, said All Might as he started walking towards the ledge. I seriously am out of time, so I really must go, continued All Might, which was enough to break Izuku out of his shaking as he looked at All Might. Wait, said Izuku, although All Might wouldn't hear any of it. No, I will not wait, said All Might, but Izuku was persistent. But, said Izuku as a distant memory came to his mind. You should probably give it up, was the voice of the quirk doctor. I'm sorry Izuku. I'm sorry, came the cry of his mother Inko Midoriya. Don't worry big brother, I'm here for you, said his sister Fubuki with a sympathetic tone. What the hell can you do? You're quirkless, came the sardonic question from his childhood friend Katsuki Bakugo as he mocked Izuku's lack of quirk in a hero society. That might be true, but even so, thought Izuku as he clenched his fist, gathering every ounce of determination to ask the question. Even if I don't have a quirk, can I become a hero? Asked Izuku, who stopped the #1 hero in his track. Can even someone without a quirk be like you? Asked Izuku as he poured his heart into the question as the man looked at Izuku with concern and surprise. Without a quirk? Asked All Might, but he was cut short when smoke started releasing from his body, reminding the #1 hero of his limit. Oh no, holy shit, goddammit, thought All Might, although Izuku was unaware of the #1 hero dilemma as he was looking at the ground, showing his lack of self-confidence. It might have been because I don't have a quirk, but I'm always made fun of. Maybe that's why. I don't know. But I think saving people is super cool, said Izuku as at this point the smoke had already engulfed the #1 pro hero, obscuring him from everyone's sight as Izuku gained a smile. Saving people with a fearless smile. I want to be the greatest hero, like you, said Izuku with a blush on his cheeks as he poured out everything as he raised his head to look at the pro hero. I want to be the greatest hero, like you. Although he was quickly cut short when All Might's skinny form was revealed to him, giving the boy a jump scare. Izuku let out a scream. Why you're deflating, said Izuku before he looked left and right. Wait, up until now? Huh, said Izuku, showing confusion as he looked at the skinny All Might. Warily fake. A fake? You're so skinny, said Izuku. The deflated All Might tried to defend himself. I am All Might. Although he vomited blood as Izuku screamed dramatically. No way, said Izuku, denying that his idol would be so skinny. You know how the guys at the pool are constantly flexing and posturing? It's like that, said All Might, wiping the blood off his mouth, although Izuku still denied it. No way, shouted Izuku as he shook before he repeated the same thing again. It can't be. All Might is fearless. He saves everyone with a smile. He's the greatest, said Izuku as he stated every positive attribute of All Might to try and justify that the man standing in front of him is a fake. All Might looked away with a sigh. A fearless smile, huh? Asked All Might to himself as he sat on the ground, leaning his back on the ledge of the roof. Now that you've seen me like this, young man, make sure you don't write about it online, even accidentally, said All Might as Izuku leaned forward before All Might pulled his white shirt, revealing a large scar scaring the boy. It's an injury I got from an enemy's attacks 5 years ago. Half of my respiratory organs were destroyed, and I lost my whole stomach. I've become emaciated from repeated surgeries and the after effects. Right now, I can only work as a hero for about 3 hours a day, said All Might with a serious look, wanting to convey the seriousness of the topic. Izuku had a grim look on his face. That can't be. 5 years ago. Was that when you fought Toxic Chainsaw? Asked Izuku as he looked at the man who adjusted himself on the ground. You're well informed. But a punk like that couldn't defeat me. This fight was not made public to the world. I asked that it not be made public. Said All Might before he looked down and then to Izuku. I will save people with a smile. The symbol of peace cannot be daunted by evil. I smile to show the pressure of heroes and to trick the fear inside of me. Pros are always risking their lives. I cannot simply say, you can become a hero even without power. Said All Might as Izuku gasped in shock and eyes widened at having his dream be rejected as well by his favorite hero. Looking down, he tried to put a forceful smile on his face. I see. Said Izuku as All Might stood up from his sitting position. If you want to help others, then you could also become a police officer. Said All Might as he started walking towards the roof door. They're often teased because they get villains delivered to their doorstep, but that is also a fine occupation. Said All Might in an honest tone. Opening the door, he stood for a few seconds. It's not bad to dream. But you also have to consider what's realistic, young man. Said All Might, finally hitting the nail in the coffin and shattering everything Izuku had dreamt. His years of hardship and holding hope was all for nothing. Looking down on the floor, Izuku walked away defeated at this point. There was no reason to pursue a dream that was hopeless. Even his idol have told him in a nice way that it was a stupid dream. He walked towards the door, opening it. Although unlike with All Might, there was a large portal before he could make sense of everything. He was quickly sucked inside, with his plight for help went unanswered. Being declared quirkless was a hard blow to the stomach that Izuku will never forget. He could vividly remember the day he went to the doctor's office, only to have his dream shattered. You should probably give it up. Was the voice of the quirk doctor. I cannot simply say, you can become a hero even without power. Said All Might as he looked at Izuku with pity. The word that was used multiple times as people continuously rejected his efforts. Each insult was shaving his sanity and humanity as a whole. I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Came the cry of his mother in Midoriya. Apologies that were thrown around without any consideration to his feelings, being treated as a frail child that needs babying. You know, if you really want to be a hero that badly, there actually might be another way. Just pray that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life and take a swine dive off the roof of the building. Said his childhood friend Katsuki Bakugo as he mocked his dream. Didn't people already have enough rejecting him, rejecting his kindness, that they continuously took advantage of? Is he really that disliked that they would want his death? To think I would find such an innocent soul surrounded by darkness. Said an unknown voice as Izuku frantically opened his eyes as he looked around him, getting nervous when the only thing he could see was darkness. Then purple flames were summoned, creating a circle that surrounded Izuku, before it lit a giant throne that reached the sky itself. Sitting on it was a large armored man being flanked by a larger soldier with equal size. Who are you, mister? Asking Izuku to be polite as the more he looked at the man's eyes, he felt like he was looking at death itself, like he was looking at the embodiment of darkness itself. I am Ashborn. I was a former ruler that loyally served under the Absolute Being until his death by the hand of the other rulers. Right now I'm the Shadow Monarch. In your human language, I'm the God of Death. Said Ashborn as Izuku freaked out. GG, God of Death. I didn't die, did I? Asked Izuku frantically, not expecting to be face to face with the God of Death himself. Ashborn felt amusement, but also a sense of pity for the boy life that had driven him insecure. Do not worry, I'm not here to take your soul, nor are you dead, said Ashborn, finally calming down Izuku, who raised his head from bowing down. Then why am I here? Asked Izuku, stuttering to form the words as Ashborn nodded his head. I know meeting me is an overwhelming experience for you, but I only have good intentions. Right now, I've been growing tired and I'm in need of an eternal slumber, but I can't do that without having a successor to the throne. Said Ashborn, and Izuku seemed to be following as he nodded his head. Under any circumstances I would have left such a task to the architect of finding me suitable heir, but I do not trust them with such a delicate task, so as you have guessed, I've been searching for a successor to my powers, but it had to be someone who fulfilled a set of requirements. Said Ashborn as Izuku nodded his head. My requirements were no easy task, as I wanted someone who had been already exposed to the darkness of the world, but managed to maintain his innocence and kindness and selflessness for so long. Such was the basic of a king, and you, Izuku Midoriya, have passed my requirements. Said Ashborn, cracked a small smile as Izuku was shocked. What? Why me? I'm sure there were a lot of candidates that were even better than me. Asked Izuku as his insecurities surfaced once more. That is the reason why I want you as my successor. It's your selflessness that had attracted me to your soul. In my many years I had overseen the mortals around the universe. They all have displayed greed in order to fulfill their desires, which is why I couldn't let my power fall into the hands of those who is going to abuse it. Said Ashborn as he looked in the eyes of Izuku. Accepted Izuku Midoriya, for it's your destiny to change this world into something even better and combat my old enemies that are bound to wake up. Let my power guide you and vanquish the monarchs," said Ashbourne as Izuku gained a determined look, something that made the giant man behind Ashbourne to crack a smile as he saw Ashbourne in place of Izuku. Izuku knelt in one leg. "I accept the responsibility that comes with being the monarch of the shadow, and I thank you, my predecessor Ashbourne, for giving me this opportunity," said Izuku with determination in his eyes as Ashbourne smirked. "You have the making of a king, very well, use my powers, but this journey will be a tedious one, but I'm sure your iron will could overcome anything that it stands in its way," said Ashbourne as the darkness around him manifested, taking the shape of shadow soldiers that were composed of all kind of monsters. The shadow then engulfed Izuku, overwhelming him before he started to fade away from the plane, leaving only Ashbourne, Bellion and the high-ranking shadow soldiers. "I could see why you chose to pick a successor yourself and not use the help of the rulers," said Bellion, praising his master. "I merely picked my successor. Moving forward he will pave his own path, and the system created by those architect will help his body grow accustomed to the power that comes with being a shadow monarch, and most importantly prepare him mentally for the things that will be required from him to do, and killing will be something he will have to get numb to eventually, or he won't survive for long with the kind of enemies I had accumulated in my lifetime," said Ashbourne. Welcome player. Chapter 2. The Hero Association in the System. Izuku had expected to wake up on the same roof of the building where he got rejected, but oddly enough he found himself in the hospital bed. Under any circumstances this would have freaked him out, but instead he felt much calmer, and his head that always went at the speed of a bullet train was much calmer, making him able to process his surroundings properly. Looking up he found a blue screen floating in front of him and finally understood that his meeting with the Shadow Monarch wasn't some fantasy his mind had created in order to compensate for his rejection by the symbol of peace, although with his brilliant mind, he would never imagine something like that with great details. "So you finally woke up?" came a calm voice as Izuku narrowed his eyes at the chair that is in the far corner of his hospital room to see a handsome young man with slick orange hair, having only a single strand poking out and black eyes. The young man was seen wearing a black tux. "So what is the chief inspector of the Japanese Hero Association surveillance team doing here in a room with a no-name quirkless civilian?" asked Izuku, unflinching as he made eye contact with the man himself, not bothered that he was talking to a high-ranking agent. Jinchul seemed to be pleasantly surprised him. From the reports the boy was said to have a lack of confidence due to being quirkless and is likely to stutter when facing someone of important status, but that doesn't seem to be the case, thought Jinchul before he adopted a professional look, maintaining a stoic expression on his face. "You're right on that, Izuku Midoriya. I wouldn't be here for something as trivial as that considering my busy schedule, but the chairman himself had taken an interest in you after you successfully managed to survive entering a dungeon," said Jinchul, although his tone showed a great amount of curiosity. "Dungeon? So he is talking about the portal that sucked me in to meet the Shadow Monarch. Luckily Ashbourne was kind enough to give me some basic information on those so-called dungeon," thought Izuku to himself before he looked at Jinchul. "So that gate that sucked me in was a dungeon? Well, that explains the monsters that were roaming around," said Izuku, obviously faking his story, which went unnoticed. "By Jinchul, but I'm curious, why would a big shot like the chairman take an interest in me?" asked Izuku as the man nodded his head. "The gate that you went through is something still relatively new to us, and we have been secretly keeping it away from the public. Even pro heroes are clueless about the existence of those gates, which should give you an idea of how dangerous the situation is," said Jinchul, putting emphasis that even pro heroes were not entitled to the existence of the gates. "But that's not all. Those gates don't allow anybody to enter unless you're quirkless or have a weak quirk, but people like All Might can't enter the dungeon, no matter how much he tried," explained Jinchul, and Izuku knew where this conversation was going. "We're still studying those so-called gates, but from what we gathered so far those gates lead to some sort of pocket dimension where there is monsters. The goal is to kill every beast inside, including the boss himself, in order for those portals to close. If not cleared within 7 days, we will have something called Dungeon Break, in which those mythical beasts could be able to enter our world and cause chaos. Luckily we have managed to keep it hidden," said Jinchul. Jinchul then continued, "From our research, we also found that those quirkless people who have successfully survived those dungeons came out with powers which couldn't be classified as quirks. As such, it was decided for it to be called mana," said Jinchul as he rubbed his head. That sounds interesting, but something tells me that this visit wasn't about what dungeons are, considering I had a first-hand experience," said Izuku as Jinchul nodded, impressed. "You're right, you see, chairman wants to create a special task force called the Hunters. Their goal is to solely kill those monsters before they could ever set foot on our country and harm the civilians living in it. Just know you're not forced to accept if you don't feel your heart in it, but I assure you we will pay you handsomely for your services," said Jinchul. I accept regardless of the situation. My dream was to one day become a hero like All Might, but that died a long time ago when my idol rejected my dream, but being a hunter sound better for me. I could actively work to save people from threats that are even dangerous than those low-life villains, even if people don't know about it. I will be honored to be part of such a task force and to get the chance to serve my country," said Izuku with conviction as Jinchul couldn't help the smile on his face. The reports about him are very true. He is still a selfless teenager, especially with how life has dealt him a bad hand. Maybe this won't be bad, thought Jinchul. Very well, we will have all the necessary paperwork prepared in order for you to be part of the task force. We will be contacting you as soon as possible in order to start training you and the others that will undoubtedly take part in the task force," said Jinchul before he stood up and wore his sunglasses. He started walking towards the exit. "Once more I would like to thank you for accepting this. You may not be recognized by the populace, but we appreciate your loyalty to our beloved country Japan. Stay safe," said Jinchul before he slid the door open and walked away. Izuku nodded his head before he looked at the blue screen in front of his eyes. Message. You have unread mail. Izuku had tried touching the screen to no avail as his hand phased through the blue screen before he decided to try another method, open the mailbox. Said Izuku, and luckily the blue screen changed once more. Message. Welcome. Player. Unread. Daily quest. Preparing to become strong has arrived, unread. It was then that 3 blue screens appeared in front of him. I don't expect this to be easy, thought Izuku with a sigh. Alarm. The system will help the player's growth. Alarm. If he fails to obey the system's orders, there may be penalty. Alarm. Your rewards have arrived. Izuku had read the alarms that had popped up in front of him and had understood a few of what was required of him to do. The system was meant to help him grow stronger, to help him prepare himself, so the system is some kind of a limiter placed on me. Thought Izuku looked at his still scrawny body. It was really pathetic and sad. I don't really blame All Might for breaking my dreams. I wouldn't survive the entrance exam if that was the case, but with the system things will be different, but this time I will become a hunter and not a hero, thought Izuku. Preparing to become strong. Check. Said Izuku as the screen started changing, revealing a long list of training which was required from him to fulfill. Question directions. Daily quest, getting ready to become powerful. Goal. Incomplete, push-ups 0-100. Incomplete, curl-ups 0-100. Incomplete, curl-ups 0-100. Incomplete, squat 0-100. Incomplete, running 0-10 kilometers. Warning. Failing to complete this daily quest will bring a punishment associated with this quest. Izuku was bug-eyed as he looked at the ridiculous training session. Even for an athlete who had trained a lot, this is simply insane. Do they really have so much high expectation of me to fulfill such task, thought Izuku before he begrudgingly remembered his rejection at the roof. No, I can't just back down like this. Besides, if Ashbourne is correct about those so-called enemies, then I need to be strong as quickly as possible, so I can't reject an offer of becoming strong. Thought Izuku before he uncovered himself ready to start completing his training session. 4 days have passed ever since he first met the chief inspector of the Japanese Heroes Association surveillance team and started his first step into becoming strong thanks to the system. His mother had been frantic the moment she heard that he was in the hospital and had been inspecting him for any injuries. Luckily, and thanks to some outside help, his condition was simply written off as a panic attack from almost being killed by the slime villain. His little sister Fubuki was quite a pain in the ass. While she may have worried about him, she was also quite annoyed that he always found himself in quite a lot of troubles, so he couldn't really blame her for that. But one good thing that came out of this is that she found her resolve. You might not be able to become a hero like you always wanted, big brother, but I will become one for you, so cheer me on, said Fubuki with dedication in her eyes. If he was being honest, that little declaration really put a smile on his face. For a long time Fubuki had never taken interest in being a hero like he did. She simply wanted an easy life by lazing around the house and being on her phone texting to her friends. But with her taking a resolve to becoming a hero, he knew she will be able to achieve it, and with her having an enhanced version of their mother quirk at this point, she is guaranteed a place in the hero course. Although he was surprised to learn that his little stunt with All Might had resulted in the 2 soda bottles containing the villain to fall, allowing the villain to roam free and capture his former childhood friend, Kitsuki Bakugo. Luckily All Might was around the area and had put an end to the villain, although Izuku could already guess how painful it was for the symbol of peace to push himself beyond his 3-hour limit to save a hostage after the heroes in the scene proved to be incompetent in fighting the small-time villain. He felt bad since he was responsible for the incident to happen, but at this point there were no point in thinking about the past. He is starting anew, and it felt quite ironic to him. As well, he may have not died in a manner of speaking, he did get reborn with a power that far surpass anything a quirk can do. So far his stay in the hospital was rather pleasant and the staff were quite caring to his needs, although he rarely asked for anything. But it was obvious that the Hero Association, more precisely the chairman himself, has been taking care of his medical bills and preventing any discrimination from happening inside the establishment. Right now, it was his last day inside the hospital for some reason. Despite being at full health, he was restricted from leaving the hospital until further confirmation. He could only assume that they were trying to have a medical report about him to make some sort of diet and training regimen so they could properly train him, although it's useless, considering that the system had already done its job. Alarm. Running 10 kilometers. Complete 10 kilometers. The blue screen once more showed to the black-haired boy how far he had gotten in his training. He had been doing the daily quest every day, having not experienced the penalty zone, which showed the amount of discipline and dedication he had for his training, and really getting strong, as at this point, if anybody could improve himself, would be him. If there was anything he learned those 4 days is that he got to decide if he really reached his limit or not, if he could do something or not. There is nobody who could love him more than himself, and he should show his body appreciation. He can't just neglect his body and hope that All Might or any other to do that for him. He needs to work hard for it. Question directions. Goal. Push-ups, 100 100s. Curl-ups, 100 100s. Curl-ups, 100 100s. Squats, 100 100s. Running 10 kilometers. Izuku then looked at the overall goal for the day and was satisfied that he had finally completed his daily quest. Quest rewards. Choose your reward. You may choose one of the rewards below. Reward number 1. Status recovery. Reward number 2. Stat points +3. Reward number 3. Random box +1. Will you accept? Accept. Reject. Izuku then picked the first reward before accepting the quest reward. Accept status recovery, said Izuku, as he was engulfed in a green light as his fatigue was healed. Izuku was already impressed with the 3 rewards that the system offered. He had tried, as the reward number 3 had basically given him a random box which contained a key for a dungeon. Reward number 2 had increased his stat points by +3. He was already continuously leveling up. It was like playing a video game, with the game being the one in control of your life and monitoring your progress. Status. Name. Izuku Midoriya. Level 1. Job. None. Fatigue. 0. Idle. None. HP. 100. MP. 10. Strength. 16. Vitality. 10. Agility. 10. Intelligence. 10. Sense. 10. Remaining points. 3. Izuku then decided to shift the screen to his current skills, and while it disheartened him seeing himself still LV.1 in the system, he was quite determined to become even stronger until he could become a worthy Shadow Monarch. I need to up my game, I need to become stronger so I don't ever feel that emotion again, said Izuku to himself, not wanting to feel that emotion of weakness and hopelessness. Skills. Passive. Unknown, max. Muscularity LV.1. Active. Sprint LV.1. Chapter 3. Future Hunters Gathering. A month has passed since the system and the meeting with the chief inspector of the Japanese Hero Association surveillance team. He had been diligently training both his mind and body. Luckily, those random box that the system offered had dungeon keys, so basically he was racking experience the moment he had left the hospital. Back then time felt like moving slowly, but after the system things have been going quite quickly. Maybe it was because he no longer worried over unnecessary things that only held him back. The only problem that he had to face was his mother, his little sister Fubuki, and Kitsuki Bakugo. Obviously, his unnatural growth that came from his daily training had left a lot of questions on the mind of those who knew him, but the changes in his appearance, like his hair becoming black and his freckles having disappeared, completely made him the center of attention, especially the girls at his school, as he had shifted from the plain quirkless nerdy looking guy in school to a handsome Adonis. Quirkless guy. Basically, he became a chick magnet in just a month's time, and the amount of flirting done had made him even more hated by the so-called proclaimed alpha male in the school, who had to re-evaluate themselves completely. Then there is the issue with the teachers. He had obviously skipped school several days at one point for his training or some dungeon clearing to level up. Obviously the teachers were quite unhappy, but the girls seemed to think otherwise, as they viewed him as a mysterious bad boy. It was a pain in the ass, especially trying to avoid an already pissed Kitsuki Bakugo, who was pretty much humiliated publicly when a no-name villain had almost suffocated him to death back then. Adding to his changes made him even more agitated and quite violent. Then there is his mother, who was contacted by the school headboard about him skipping school. Obviously his mother had pretty much been breathing down on his neck ever since then, as she had taken to interrogating him on several occasions, and when she couldn't get anything out of him, she had taken an extreme measure, which was spying, and oh boy, did she really suck at it. Too bad for her, his solo dungeon quest had pretty much allowed him to increase his overall stats, and his senses was one of the qualities he had invested in quite a few of his stat points, aside from strength, intelligence, agility, etc. Now all he could do was strengthen himself until the Hero Association dealt with their own problems and then contact him, but he was in no rush. He had already pulled away his application into the hero course, much to the pleasure of Katsuki Bakugo and worry of his mother and sister. Izuku had taken to doing his daily quest without a shirt, quite proud of what he had achieved on his own, with the fact that he no longer had the need to hide under baggy clothes to hide his shame. The past month he had taken to creating some sort of plan the moment he understood how the system worked well, not completely but the rewarding system. He had realized that simply investing in strength only would probably make him a buff version of All Might, which made him frown remembering the memory of his rejection. The same could be said to the others, so he had taken to creating a balance between his stats. Although strength was the main factor that he had invested in as experiencing his first dungeon, he had realized how difficult it is to fight when being unarmed or weapon broken. Agility was the very next thing he invested in because he had realized that all monsters are not like the hero versus villain scenario where they fight out in the open, but rather some of those monsters like to attack when the opponent has his guard down, so agility was very much needed at this point if he needed to survive. Status. Name. Izuku, Midoriya, level 18. Job. None, fatigue 0. Title. Wolf Slayer. HP. 2220. MP. 350. Strength. 50. Stamina. 27. Agility. 35. Intelligence. 27. Sense. 29. Remaining points. 0. Izuku was sitting on the sofa watching the TV for news. It was the usual, although All Might has been sighted more often around Musatafu, which if he was being honest he was quite surprised, but at this point he couldn't find any reason to care about the man. Ring. Ring. His phone went off and it was quite odd to get a call from anybody, not even those annoying fangirls called him, although the fault was his, since he never really gave his number to anyone. Picking up the phone, he quickly answered the phone as he placed it on his ear. "Hello Mr. Midoriya, I hope your month has been pleasant so far," came a familiar voice that Izuku would never really forget. "Hello to you as well Mr. Jinchul, and yes, this month have been far more pleasant thanks to your efforts," said Izuku. "Something like this was of no big deal, we're sorry if we have kept you waiting this whole month," apologized Jinchul, but Izuku didn't mind. "Don't worry about it. I didn't really expect this would be an easy task to do considering the weight of the situation we found ourselves in, but that month has helped me get accustomed to my own situation, while having to train my body to lift some of the weight of the trainers that will undoubtedly take over our training," said Izuku as Jinchul had a small smile on his face, extremely pleased. "I'm glad to hear that you have been keeping yourself busy, but we're now prepared. We have already finalized the necessary papers, and the facility where you will be training along with the other recruits has been already built a little away from the civilization, you could say near UA High School itself," said Jinchul, a little pleased and relieved. "I'm glad to hear things have been going well at your end Mr. Jinchul, so when am I expected to be there?" asked Izuku. Jinchul looked at the paper resting neatly in front of his desk, taking into consideration that you haven't filled your family with your situation, and given that most of you are still teenagers who go to middle school, we will say Friday would be a suitable time for all of us to meet, said Jinchul. "Your transportation are already handled, you're expected to be at Mustafu Stop, which is near an abandoned gas station at 12 o'clock in the morning. You will find parked on the side of the road a black bus. You will just have to further confirm your identity with one of our agents. Once he gave you confirmation you could take a seat and patiently wait until you're brought to the facility," said Jinchul as Izuku smiled at the idea of meeting others with a similar backstory as him. Jinchul then took a serious tone, "Although I know the idea of getting acquainted with others with similar backgrounds, make sure you avoid certain individuals that will undoubtedly be in the bus, some of them have ill intention," said Jinchul as Izuku furrowed an eyebrow. "So what do you suggest I do?" asked Izuku as Jinchul stayed silent for a few seconds. "I recommend you stay put in the bus until you all have arrived at the facility. Once that happens, those with ill intention will be isolated into another part of the facility to avoid them from causing trouble to the others, but so far the ones who are close to your age have proved to be trustworthy like you," said Jinchul as Izuku nodded. "Very well, I understand, and thank you for your efforts Mr. Jinchul, until we meet again," said Izuku as the man. "Have a nice day Mr. Midoriya," said Jinchul before he hung up. "Finally, this monotonous life will soon be over, and I get to do something exciting and most importantly get stronger," thought Izuku with a smile on his face. Just like planned, Izuku was ready to leave the apartment wearing black shirt, black pants along with black shoes. He was definitely taking the color black to a new whole level. He could vividly remember when his taste in clothes had pretty much turned upside down. His mother had thought that he got involved in a group of teens who worship the devil. That day was filled with trying to explain that he had just taken a liking to the color black. Opening the door of the apartment, he managed to escape undetected, although when he returned he will probably get an earful from his mother, but at this point he didn't care because he had a job to do. The trip was quite long, but at the end he found the gas station and the bus itself. Walking towards the door, he knocked on it slightly, which opened to reveal a man in a business suit and black glasses. "The name is Izuku Midoriya," said Izuku simply as the man simply gave the black-haired teen a nod. "That inside?" was the only response that came from the agent as he walked inside to find that some of the seats were occupied and was surprised that there were a lot of teens. His eyes then fell on the only empty seat so far, which was next to a pretty young woman with grey eyes and blonde hair and a bob cut. She was wearing a white button shirt highlighted by black and black pants and brown sandals. Walking towards the girl, "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" asked Izuku in a polite tone as the girl looked up to meet with Izuku's eye, and she suddenly started to have a red tint in her cheeks before she nodded meekly. "No, you could sit," said Cha-Hae-in. "Thank you," said Izuku as he took a comfortable seat next to her. It was painfully obvious that the girl was quite nervous and uncomfortable, and he could relate to her on a personal level. "My name is Izuku Midoriya, it's nice to meet you. I hope I'm not making you uncomfortable," said Izuku with a kind tone. "No, it's fine, I'm just not a social person, and my name is Cha-Hae-in," was the nervous response that came from Cha-Hae-in as she nervously looked down with a small blush. "It's fine, I am also not really a social person. My previous experience had made it a little hard for me to trust anybody, so don't worry, I'm sure that eventually we will get over this phase," said Izuku softly as Cha-Hae-in felt comfortable when she heard that. Leaning forward, "Are you quirkless as well?" asked Cha-Hae-in as she whispered her secret nervously, and Izuku simply smiled and rubbed her head affectionately, which made her blush but also happy. "Yes, I'm also quirkless, so you don't need to be nervous, I'm not one to judge," said Izuku as Hae-in smiled, although she didn't know how to continue her conversation with the mysterious handsome nice guy. "How did you get reawakened?" asked Izuku, seeing as she wanted to make a conversation but was really failing. I was running away at the time, and I accidentally ran into that blue portal thing. I don't remember much of what happened aside from the fact that I had killed some of the goblins in self-defense before I fainted and woke up in the hospital bed with Mr. Jinchul talking to me." "What about you?" asked Hae-in. "She obviously has trust issues. I need to show her that I'm willing to trust her as well," thought Izuku before he nodded his head. "I had the chance to meet my favorite pro hero, which I won't reveal his name for his sake. Being quirkless, I wanted to become a hero, but he kindly told me that the profession with my current situation would be impossible." It was a heavy blow to the stomach, but when I tried to leave the roof that we landed on, I was dragged to a dungeon, and just like you, I woke up with Mr. Jinchul talking to me, said Izuku as Hae-in felt great sadness, as well as she was also at one point a great fan of heroes and wanted to be one. Being quirkless, she was told to give up in a not so nice way by her peers. "But it's fine now, the dungeon has allowed me to reawaken and get those mana, which helped fix some of my lack of self-confidence. But aside from that, why did you accept to work as a hunter?" asked Izuku as Cha-Hae-in took a serious look. "At this point, no job will ever want me to work in their establishment due to me being quirkless. Aside from that, I felt that by becoming a hunter, I would be achieving a distant dream that died down, which is to save people." "What about you?" Hae-in asked. "I had the same reason to apply, but I did it because I merely wanted to serve my country, even if I don't get recognized for it by the population, and I prefer it that way, since there will be no paparazzi harassing my family and be able to walk on the street," said Izuku as Hae-in nodded with a smile with a little admiration towards Izuku, as she had gotten comfortable that she didn't realize that the bus had already moved a long time ago. The bus had shortly stopped as the same man with business suit stood in front of the future hunters. "Now we have arrived at the facility, we request all of you to obey the regulation and follow us onto the gym in an orderly fashion," said the agent as everyone nodded their heads. "They're quite strict," thought Izuku with a little sweat on his forehead, realizing that this will be a little annoying to deal with, but he is bound to get used to it. The first row seated stood up before they left the bus, and then the second row, and the same process had continued like that until they also got their turn to exit the bus. Hae-in was twiddling her fingers nervously as she stood closer to the only person she felt comfortable around, which was Izuku, who didn't really mind the company. "It's best if you take a few deep breaths and don't overthink the situation or you will get even more nervous," said Izuku as he gave advice to the girl next to him, who complied as she took a few deep breaths, finding her heart started to ease down and stopped feeling nervous, although the pressure was quite high on them. Izuku on the other hand remembered his conversation with Wu Jinchul and had been glancing around him constantly to check the competition. He was quite pleased to know that most of them were quite good people. The first one that he already felt he would get along with would be a lanky teen with red hair and a curtain hairstyle that is parted over the left side of his right eye. He had a very amicable smile, although he could feel nervousness surrounding the teen. He was wearing a striped business suit, trying to appear professional in front of high-ranked officials. The second person was an above-average teen with spiky orange hair, orange eyes, pronounced canine teeth, and neatly trimmed sideburns. Just like the retard, he was wearing a black tux. Although compared to the others he was quite nervous as he glanced around him until his eyes landed on Izuku, who just gave him a reassuring smile and a nod with a thumbs up, which managed to put a smile on the young orange-haired teen. The others were impressive in their own rights, but some of them he had already didn't like, and it was shown through their arrogant smirk and the look they gave to them like a predator looking at their prey. He knew that confrontation with them will be imminent, but he will trust the chairman to deal with the nuisance before they got way over their head. The black limousine rolled over as everyone tensed when the chairman Go-Gun-E came out, a muscular old man with grey hair, greenish-grey eyes, and numerous scars on his body. Given his status he was wearing a three-piece suit. The man's smile seemed to be genuine as he gave a look of a grandfather looking at his grandchildren, although his aura that surrounded him made everyone flinch or unable to make eye contact with him. That man is intense. I expect no less from the chairman of the Hero Association, thought Izuku, with a bead of sweat rolling down his face. He knew the man was concealing his aura, but even the few that were leaking out showed the gap in power between him and the chairman. Hello future hunters, my name is Go-Gun-E, and I'm the chairman of the Hero Association. I thank you for accepting my selfish request, but rest assured your services will be rewarded, said Go-Gun-E with a smile on his face, although his attention was solely on Izuku, Cha-Hae-in, the retard, and the orange hair boy. You four are the next generation, thought Go-Gun-E with a smile, having already made a background check on the four of them, and they were still pure in his book and the ones with the most potential out of anyone, although if he is being honest, Izuku and Cha-Hae-in were the ones who stood out even when they don't want it. Now behind me is a gym built with all technology Japan could offer, as it's resistant to even All Might punches, but not immune, so you can go all out as you wish. You will be separated into groups and separated to different parts of the facility, said Go-Gun-E, seeing nobody arguing, which was his fault given his intimidating aura, before he looked to his back to see his right-hand man Wu Jinchul. Ahem, my name is Wu Jinchul. I will be stating the groups that you will be around indefinitely, even when training in a dungeon you will be in the same group, said Jinchul as everyone nodded their heads in understanding. Now group 1 consists of Izuku Midoriya, said Jinchul as Izuku locked his eyes at the man, and Hae-in seemed to grip his black sleeve shirt. Ta-Hae-in, continued Jinchul as said girl sighed in relief to be around Izuku, who simply patted her head. Doi-Jong-in, said Jinchul as the retard adjusted his glasses, although he looked more relieved to be around others his age. Lastly, Bi-Kyun-ho, said Jinchul as the teen smiled, a genuine one, as he looked at his team. Now that group 1 has been announced, please follow one of our agents into the gym section belonging to your group, said Jinchul, as the new team stepped forward and obeyed the order by following one of the agents inside the gym, leaving Jinchul and Go-Gun-E to single out those with malicious intent. This won't go as you both planned, Hwang Dong-sik and Hwang Ding-soo, thought Jinchul as he gave his stoic expression, but it was obvious from his glowing purple eyes that was hidden behind his glasses that he disliked the two brothers immensely. Chapter 4. Getting to know each other. Izuku walked inside the gymnasium built by the Hero Commission. It was obviously highly teched with all kinds of technology, which showed to Izuku that they are serious with training them. He let out a sigh as he saw his new companions' eye dart everywhere. It was obvious that they felt out of place even with the suits that they were wearing. Even he himself felt out of place, but at this point he didn't care about such trivial matters. The agent that was escorting them was unique to say the least. He wasn't like the others who had a professional face and spoke only 2 words. His eyes glowed blue as the agent aura became clear to him. If I were to judge him in hero standards, I'd say he would be in the top 20, scratch that top 15 at best, but then again I can't compare hunters to heroes, thought Izuku as he observed the young man with spiky purple hair and matching purple eyes. Just like all other agents, he wore formal business attire. Hunters from his knowledge have no restriction like the heroes have. Hunters only answer to the chairman of the Hero Association and are given license to kill monsters, and he wouldn't be surprised if they were allowed to kill humans and be in their legal rights to do so. So comparing hunters to heroes would be quite stupid from his part. Izuku's thoughts were cut off when the agent stopped in front of a metal door as he pulled his ID and ran it through the scanner. Welcome Kang Teshik was the voice that came from the scanner as the door opened, revealing equipments, but the place looked also featured things like kitchen, restroom, television and other entertainment room. The agent then turned towards the teens. Now that we've arrived at our destination, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Kang Teshik, I'm a hitman and an inspector under the Japanese Hero Association surveillance team. Introducing Teshik as he looked at them with a smile. Hitman? Asked Beak, a little curious but intimidated to say the least as Teshik nodded his head. That is correct, I'm a hitman that is tasked to do the things that heroes mostly are not allowed to do. Sometimes there are threats that need to be killed, rather than sent to prison. That's why people like me are tasked to eliminate them, and one of the reasons why I was tasked to train you as well. Said Teshik. So we're expected to be assassins as well? Asked Jong-in as he adjusted his glasses and a frown on his face. Not really, but you're expected to eliminate the monsters in the dungeon before they come out of the gates, but you need to also take into account that gates lead to another dimension, so there will be no camera, and you don't know if your so-called teammate will never attempt to stab you in the back. Said Teshik. I was told by Mr. Jinchul that some of the recruits had ill intentions and told me to not make contact with them until they have isolated them to further deal with them, said Izuku as Heian looked at him in relief. So that means that those who were left were the ones with ill intention? Asked Heian as Teshik interrupted. Yes, although some of them could be redeemed, but there are two that we doubt will ever be redeemed, so we could only wait for them to fall into our trap before we could legally arrest them, said Teshik. Are we good in the government standards? Asked Izuku curiously, wanting to see what the commission thought about them. We've already done a background check. Aside from you all being formerly quirkless, you all have a perfect track record, and don't tell anyone this, but the chairman himself had already taken a liking to the four of you, said Teshik, making Baek Kyunho, Choi Jong-in and Cha Hae-in to gain confidence in themselves. Now with that out of the way, let me give you a brief explanation on what is going to happen now that you're all here. As you see, the room that you're in is the room you will be all training in indefinitely, said Teshik as he pulled 4 ID and skillfully threw it to each of them, revealing their own ID. Those ID are the ones that will help you access this room. Only you, me, Mr. Jinchul and Chairman could access this room, so you can get comfortable here without any worry about any unwanted guests making their way here, said Teshik, seeing the relieved expression of the teens. Teshik then walked towards a table and pulled 4 papers as he showed it to the teens and handed each one to the teens. As you see, those are your training regiment that you will be expected to follow, which also include your meals, so keep those with you, even when you return to your homes, said Teshik. Izuku then looked at the paper, and his suspicion was confirmed. They have written everything that includes my medical evaluation, mused Izuku as he remembered the multiple tests he had to go through in the hospital. I won't be here the whole time since I have my own responsibility, but I will be there in the start to make sure that you're able to complete your physical portion of your training. After we have you all be in better shape, we will start with developing your skills, said Teshik as he looked at Beak. Mr. Beak, your abilities allows you to transform into a tiger-like monster, so we will have you create a martial arts that revolves around your ability, which includes claw strike, and most importantly work on your durability and speed, because tigers are fast animals, so those are the 2 main things that we will have you work on before we get to anything complicated like transformation, said Teshik as Beak nodded his head with determination, although he glanced at his partners to see them giving him a nod of approval, which meant a lot to him. Teshik then looked at Jong-in. Mr. Jong-in, you're more of a mage type rather than a fighter type like Mr. Beak, so we will have you do something different, which is controlling your flames, which in the back of your training regimen, you will find the type of exercises you will be required to do. Once that is complete, we will have you go through simulation where you will have to fight while using at the same time your flames, said Teshik as Jong-in smiled excitedly. Teshik then looked at Cha Hae-in, who seemed to get nervous. Mrs. Hae-in, just like Mr. Beak, you're a fighter type, although we have learned that you're more interested in swordsmanship, so we included that in your training regimen. We've also noticed that you have a sensitive nose that reacts to the smell of mana and quirks, which makes anything smell foul to you, so we will have you control that as well, because enemies are bound to take advantage of that, said Teshik as Hae-in nodded her head. Aside from that, after you've created your own sword style and mastered its kata, you will be required to get combat experience, so we're going to have you fight someone. After that, you're going to create your techniques that are unique to you, continued Teshik before he looked at Izuku. As for you, to be honest, we don't know how to classify you, because there were instances that you displayed to be a mage type, and instances you displayed to be a fighter type. At the end, we've decided to classify you as mage type, but one thing is for sure from our evaluation, you're a hunter who grows stronger every time you fight, said Teshik, unable to hold his curiosity. That's amazing, said Beak as he showed respect to Izuku, who simply smiled slightly. You could say that. I'm not really sure, but I think that the more I fight and gain experience, the more I grow and get accustomed. That's just my theory, said Izuku, although not really divulging about the existence of the system or his identity of being a shadow monarch. Well, that seems plausible, and it's also the conclusion we came to, so your training will be much more different compared to the others. You will fight Mr. Beak, which will help you both as you could grow stronger, while Mr. Beak could get some form of experience by fighting, said Teshika's beak grinned in excitement, and Izuku smiled. We also recommend that you use weapons, preferably daggers, and engage in a spar with Heian to help her create her own sword style and help her gain confidence since she seemed to be quite attached to you," said Teshik, much to his amusement when he saw Heian blush at being caught, and both Jong-in and B chuckled slightly, but Izuku didn't mind as he rubbed her head affectionately, which made her happy. Lastly, with Jong-in, you will also engage with him in a spar. It's recommended to also pressure him to fight, which will help him make quick decisions and get him quickly used to long-drawn fights," said Teshik as Izuku nodded his head and Jong-in smiled. "Now with that out of the way, let me show you around. As you see, the room was made to look like a penthouse, enough to house you all, so there will be 4 bedrooms which have their own personal bathroom, there is living room, washing room etc," said Teshik. "So are we expected to move in?" asked Izuku in a curious tone as Teshik shaked his head. "You're not really obligated to move in the gymnasium if the idea is uncomfortable for you all, but this was made to give you a comfortable environment because at the end of the day all of you are still teenagers and your comfort is our priority. I know that some of you live alone and are obligated to pay your rent, but this penthouse is rent-free and has all the necessary equipment, and most of all it's much safer," said Teshik as all of them smiled. "Think of it from this perspective, the more you climb the ranks and get stronger, the more you will be working outside clearing dungeons. There will be instances where the dungeons will be a higher level and a further plan will be needed, so you can meet your plan and crash here," said Teshik, as everyone found the merit in his words. "That does sound like a good idea. It will also promote friendship and camaraderie between us, so I see more benefit from it," said Izuku as the others nodded their heads. "But concerning the dungeon, are we expected to clear dungeons?" asked Izuku as he looked at Teshik, who nodded his head. "Of course you will be tasked to clear dungeons, but you will be accompanied by me, but you need to understand one thing, dungeons are ranked from E rank to S rank so far, we've seen up to B rank level threat, but until then we will be doing E rank and D rank dungeon level, until I deem you ready for anything higher than that," said Teshik as they all nodded their head in agreement. "So are we going to start training?" asked Heian as she looked at their instructor, who shook his head. "No, we won't start training right now. We need you to get comfortable in the new environment and settle in properly while getting more acquainted with each other before we could start anything as training," said Teshik before he started moving towards the exit door as he pressed on a green button on the side, allowing the door to open as he walked outside, leaving as the door shut behind him. "So, what are we going to do?" asked Beak as he looked at his teammates. "We should probably get to know each other. We don't need to reveal anything that makes us uncomfortable, but establishing some form of camaraderie will be beneficial in the long run," said Izuku as Jong-in nodded his head, even though the idea was foreign to him due to his past. Izuku walked towards the kitchen and towards the fridge, opening revealed sealed foods and drinks. "There are sodas in the fridge, what do you prefer to drink?" asked Izuku as each one picked their choice of soda as they all took a seat on the sofa with Heian being next to Izuku. "I'm going to start first. My name is Izuku Midoriya. You can call me what you want, as long as it's comfortable for you. My likes are not as it used to be due to my circumstances, but I like analyzing heroes. I even had my own notebook where I wrote my own analysis in hopes of one day becoming a hero myself, but as you see that dream died down," said Izuku. "I hope I'm not overstepping the boundaries, but what made you give up on being a hero?" asked Jong-in as he adjusted his glasses. "It's fine, I always admired heroes, and my number one idol was All Might, so the idea of becoming a hero to save everybody sounded appealing to me, but being quirkless had changed a lot of things, including my standing among my peers in school. Due to the years of bullying, I had low self-esteem and was quite shy back then, but that's beside the point. I had a chance to meet All Might, but he had kindly rejected my dreams, but I can't blame him, I was quite frail back then," said Izuku as everyone flinched in the room. It was obvious that being rejected by your idol would shatter anyone, especially when you admired him for years. Moving back to the introduction, I like training to get stronger, so I don't feel the feeling of hopelessness and weakness, and so I can protect everyone that matters to me. I like my mother and little sister, and I like to wear black attires, because it helps me not stand out or disappear in the night," said Izuku as everyone nodded their heads so far. "My dislikes are fake heroes who's in the job for the wrong reason. My dislike are bullying and discrimination against quirkless people, and discrimination on those with villainous quirks. I dislike when people hurt my family and friends," said Izuku as everyone nodded their head following so far. "My hobbies are training to properly understand my mana abilities and further grow stronger, analyzing anything that catches my interest, helping my mother and my sister and clearing dungeons," said Izuku, catching everyone's attention. "You make it sound like you cleared other dungeons," said Jong-in as he looked at Izuku, who nodded. "Only one dungeon aside from the one where I reawakened," said Izuku. Lastly, my dream is to get stronger to protect my loved ones and to serve my country by defeating the monsters in the dungeon and maybe have an easy life, but something tells me this won't go as I want," said Izuku as everyone grimaced, knowing that dungeons are something relatively new to them and they're going in there with minimal information. Jongin then stood up. "I guess I'm next. My name is Choi Jongin, just call me anything. I don't really mind that much. My likes are smoking because it help relieve stress. I like my grandparents, and I like this group already because I feel like I belong somewhere and it's nice to have people with similar background," said Jongin as everyone smiled. "My dislikes is when my grandparents tire themselves out for me, discrimination, bullying, villains and monsters. My hobbies are reading and getting knowledgeable because my grandparents always told me knowledge is power. My new hobby is discovering and understanding my mana much better," said Jongin. "My dreams is to one day become a strong hunter and a dependable leader, and finally have my grandparents enjoy their retirement by using the money I earned to have them go on vacation to enjoy their short life," said Jongin, although everyone could see that the idea of his grandparents dying was hard for him, but he understood it more than anyone that life is short. Izuku smiled. "I'm sure your grandparents will be proud of you and just know that we have your back," said Izuku as Beak and Heian nodded with a smile of their own. "Thank you guys," said Jongin a little more happier than before as he sat down with Beak standing up. "My name is Beak Yunho, just call me Yunho or anything else that makes you comfortable. My likes are training to become strong. My father who is a retired pro hero," said Beak enthusiastically. "My dislikes are discrimination, villains, bullies, being weak and not being able to be like my father, and that is being a dependable person," said Beak a little sad, but a smile from his companion cheered him up. "My hobbies are training to become strong. Well, I'm not a bookworm, I enjoy learning new things which include reading my father's strategy books and other stuff," said Beak. "My dream is to one day become a dependable leader and surpass my father, and even though he had always loved me and respected me, I want to do something to deserve his praise and make him even prouder of me," said Beak. "I guess we have something in common, Yunho. Let's help each other reach our goal," said Jongin as Beak grinned and Izuku gave an approving look. Heian nervously stood up, being the only female in the group, but seeing Izuku's comforting smile she steeled her eyes. "My name is Cha Heian. I don't really mind what you call me. My likes are swordsmanship because it's unique and underrated. I don't really have a family member because I was an orphan, so I mostly lived on my own, but I do like studying to become a good student and at one point to get a good paying job," said Heian as she felt slightly uncomfortable with revealing some of her life, but Izuku's kind smile made her forget about her worries. "My dislikes are bullies, discrimination, villains, fake heroes and lecherous boys who doesn't respect me as a woman and try to take advantage of my status as quirkless to try and get their way with me," said Heian as the boys frowned but gave the girl a comforting smile, which was what she needed to continue. "My hobbies are watching old videos that are related to swordsmanship, reading, studying, watching movies, practicing with a Bakken, although with my reawakened I like to learn about my mana abilities even further to improve myself while trying to implement my own sword style," said Heian. "My dream is to one day become a respected woman and a hunter and maybe find a special person to me," said Heian as she stuttered at the end, but it was obvious that her glances had been going towards Izuku when she declared her dream and they knew that she had fallen in love with Izuku. "That's a nice dream, Heian, don't worry, we all have your back to the very end," said Izuku with a smile as he patted the girl much to her pleasure and slight embarrassment. "Okay then, I won't be moving in here mainly because I haven't told my mother or sister about my situation, because my mom is a very worrisome person and have a fragile heart, so if she learns that I'm involved with the government will probably give her panic attack, which I'd rather avoid as much as possible, although it's obvious that she will learn about my situation eventually, given that my changes had caused a lot of suspicion, especially my mom who had taken to spying on me, even though it was obvious," said Izuku with a small chuckle as the rest chuckled as well. "The same here for me, honestly. I can't leave both my grandparents alone. I need to be there for them and support them every day because they're not in their prime anymore," said Jongin. "Same here, my father doesn't really know about my situation, so I can't move in as well, besides I want to learn as much as possible from him," said Beak. "I will move here instead. My apartment is far away from here, so being close will be much better, and it's rent-free," said Heian as the entire place has a training facility so she could train, although it will be lonely. "I suggested we exchange numbers," suggested Beak as everyone nodded their heads as they all exchanged their own numbers before Beak created a group on WhatsApp with a grin plastered on his face, quite happy to say the least. The day marked a friendship between the four of them, as later they would separate to create their own guild, although Heian and Izuku will remain inseparable as their relationship would extend beyond friendship and love will bloom between them. Their names shook fear in the hearts of many, but none had much impact than both Izuku and Heian, names once quirkless, now both are national level hunters respected in many countries due to their prowess. Chapter 5. First Team Raid. Being a hunter was quite fun to say the least. There was no day that passed without there being a story to tell or experiencing new things. But the most important thing that mattered even more than being a hunter, and that is the friendship that was built between the four quirkless teens. Although for both Izuku and Heian, it was love that was growing each passing day, and at this point everybody knew. They were meant for each other, even if they were unable to properly express their true feelings due to the horrible childhood that they had to endure for years. Izuku's situation at home was finally calming down after a month, but it was obvious for anyone that Midoriya still worried for her baby boy, although seeing him gain confidence and grow every day to become a handsome young man brought some sort of comfort in her old heart, and deep down, she couldn't help but regret how she couldn't support his dream of being a hero. But at the end there are times when harsh truth can be what someone needed to remove the shackle that is binding him down and explore new things in life that are much better. For Izuku's case, All Might rejecting his dream was a spear to the chest that he at the beginning doubted he would ever recover from, but with that rejection doors were opened, giving him endless possibility that was much better, and being a hunter was the best thing that had happened to him, as he was surrounded by supportive friends who all understood the pain of being quirkless and all worked together for a common goal. His relationship with Heian was improving progressively and became much more comfortable with the idea of going out to eat, although both of them didn't try to step forward with the idea of dating each other because of their insecurities, but maybe he could finally confess to her, but he will have to pick a special day to do it. His school life situation was still as always bland with everything going in his life. Nothing could really get to him, not even Kitsuki attempt to bring him down. As for the girls, they were the same, trying to get a date with him, but they were underestimating him because he didn't so much as bat them an eye, and sometimes would have rather avoid them completely. It obviously put him in a bad light in front of many who thought he was quite rude, but at this point he didn't care because they were the same people who laughed at him. Training was going quite well in terms of physical conditioning, and although he had barely entered dungeon ever since his second one, when he went against Blue Venom Fanged Kasaka and obtained Kasaka's Venom Fang, he was still leveling up. He could only assume that the system was taking into consideration his situation. Status. Name. Izuku Midoriya. Level 21. Job. None fatigue. 0. Title. Wolf Slayer. HP. 2600. MP. 391. Strength. 53. Stamina. 30. Agility. 38. Intelligence. 30. Sense. 32. Remaining points. 3. Skills. Passive. Unknown, max. Muscularity LV.1. Active. Sprint LV.1. He can't say that he leveled up quite a lot since last time when he was in LV.18, but considering that dungeons these days are quite rare to find due to it being a new phenomenon, he couldn't really complain as he still leveled up nonetheless. Although he is not the only one who has been improving, as Baekhyunho had reached a breakthrough in his training, and his physical condition had improved as he became quite muscular for his age, showing that his training had paid off, but his abilities had undoubtedly given him a boost in his physical growth. As for his transformation ability, it was obvious that he couldn't immediately pull a full transformation, but partial transformation was within his reach, as he had gotten used to having his hands and hair transformed, which gave him an increase in his physical stats, although that in itself exhausted a lot out of him, so currently he is working on prolonging his partial transformation. Choi Jong-in was the next in line as he remained really the same in terms of physical condition, but it was obvious that he had gained a few muscles then and there, but because he is a mage type, he was focusing on controlling his flames, which he managed to successfully complete the exercises that he was asked to do, but right now he is working on a few defensive and offensive attacks, although it wasn't really strong but impressive nonetheless. Heian had really outdone herself compared to the two others. She had been practicing in creating her own sword style, although for the moment she was unable to create it, but she showed creativity which allowed her to find unorthodox ways to kill monsters efficiently. But in training session, it was the practice dolls that suffered her worth, and Izuku himself had engaged with her in sparring matches using Bakken, and she really gave him a run for his money, but at the end he won. Currently, with Izuku help, she has taken to increasing her speed in hopes of overpowering her enemies through speed and raw strength. She was also able to partially transform her sword into light, but it was quite draining and exhausting, so she chose to further her sword training before going into anything complicated. Weekends were something that Izuku greatly enjoyed, especially when he got to spend the whole day in the penthouse inside the gymnasium. But what made it even better is waking up early to spend time with Heian before others came in. She loved him and he loved her. Drinking from his soda, he let out a small sigh as the blue screen popped back to life in front of his face. Alarm. A harmful substance has been detected. Buff. Cure poison's effect is healing you. Because of the special ability that the system gave me, even alcohol is being purified. Mused Izuku to himself, although he found it both a blessing and a curse at the same time. 3, 2, 1. Pure poison has been completed. A reward the system gave me as soon as I woke up after making it through the dungeon disaster. Since there's a lot to take in recently, I just overlooked it. To think it gave me this as reward, thought Izuku as his mind drifted to the system. Quest reward. Secret quest. Courage of the weak. Great Spellcaster Candieru's blessing. The Great Spellcaster Candieru has gifted a special spell to you. Candieru's spell will ensure that you will always be strong and healthy during your lifetime. Quest reward. Temporary effect will to rehabilitate. Any dismembered body parts are restored. Permanent effect longevity. All diseases, poison and status effects are healed, and sleeping will explosively increase regeneration ability. He had already experimented with Risaka's venom. It was stupid, but after he drank the A-rank potion, the system had obviously done its job by purifying the poison that invaded his body and undid the effects that it had on his muscles. So what do you think we will do today? Asked Heian as she drank from her own soda, looking at Izuku with a blush on her face. Izuku pondered for a few moments. I can't really say I know, but at this point we've made a lot of progress. It's just a matter of time before we're allowed to clear dungeons. Said Izuku as Heian nodded her head, a little excited to finally start clearing dungeons. Speaking of which, how was your stay here? I'm sure it must have been quite lonely, said Izuku as Heian shook her head. It's fine, besides you've always made sure to visit me every day, and on weekends you mostly come early to spend time with me, so I'm grateful, said Heian with a blush on her face and a big smile. Don't worry about it, said Izuku with a smile on his face, but they were interrupted from further talk when the door opened, revealing Jong-in and Beak enjoying their conversation with each other, although it seemed that a rivalry was born between them, as they sometimes butted heads with each other over trivial matters. Luckily the rivalry was a healthy one. I hope we didn't interrupt you too, said Jong-in when he noticed both Izuku and Heian. No, it's fine really, said Heian, although she was slightly disappointed that her alone time was cut short. Good, you're all here early, came the voice of Teshik, who came through the door like he normally did as he gave his calculative gaze and nodded his head. It was obvious for the team that Teshik was a busy person, and when he came it was for either taking their training to the next level or to evaluate how far they went in their training. The day will be much different than what you have been doing for the past 2 months, because this time around, I deemed you 4 ready to finally start clearing dungeons. Obviously you're only limited to E and D rank gates, only until I deem otherwise, said Teshik, much to everyone's excitement. As for your ranks, Izuku Midoriya, you're now considered a C-rank mage, said Teshik as Izuku nodded his head. Cha Heian, you're also promoted to C-rank fighter, said Teshik as Heian smiled brightly as she looked at Izuku, who gave her a thumbs up. Joy Jong-in, you're currently promoted to D-rank mage, said Teshik as Jong-in nodded, not really upset about being lower in rank compared to the other two. Lastly, Beak Yunho, you're currently promoted to D-rank fighter, said Teshik as Beak grinned, not really upset with being ranked lower than Izuku and Heian. You've all become stronger than before, as such you're all ready for the next level of your training, and that is dungeon clearing. All of you should have received your hunter, or what we like to call raid costume, that you have submitted along with any extra equipment like sword in the case of Mrs. Cha, said Teshik as Heian nodded her head, as she had already seen her sword, and she loved it, as the material used was made out of the mana crystals found in dungeons. So what is the rank of our first dungeon? Asked Izuku as Teshik pulled paper and distributed it to everyone. The dungeon is E rank. The gate had manifested 2 days ago in an abandoned school 10 minutes from here near a subway, said Teshik as he saw the puzzled look from Beak. You can ask anything, you may be recognized as a hunter, but you're no different than a hero in training, said Teshik as Beak nodded. Why give us a report instead of telling it to us orally? Asked Beak curiously. I've been waiting for you to ask me this, and you're right, it's a waste of time, but this is merely a way to start getting you used to what you will be expected to do in the future. There are times when dungeons will be much bigger, so you can't just force your way in, so having a report to analyze from would be useful. There is also the fact that you were bound to be asked to file a report, and getting an idea on how reports are written would serve as a good example and instill some form of discipline, said Teshik as the group of teen nodded their head. Chairman might be a lax person, but we're still soldiers that need to follow the orders and protocol. Izuku thought with a newfound respect for the chairman. He is like a father who is a fun and relaxed person, but when he asks something you're more bound to do it because you want to make him proud. Now then, gear up while the dungeon is E rank. We need to get you used to being quick, because some of the dungeons could pop at any moment and be needed to be cleared as soon as possible, said Teshik as they all nodded and headed for their respective room, which they had put some of their items inside for safekeeping. Izuku was the first to come out. Not much has changed from his outfit as he didn't enjoy the idea of tight costumes, so a white shirt along with black jacket and black pants was all he needed to do the raid. Lee Kyun-ho was the second person to come out as he wore a black armor with yellow shoulder guards, grey pants, and a set of golden claws. He always liked to wear badass things, and having a set of golden claws made him look much more badass, while also adding some damage with his fighting style. Hae-in followed shortly as she wore a red-themed armor and carried a black sword with a silver hilt. She obviously felt much more confident in her choice of attire, and with Izuku's support, she felt much more comfortable to show her raid costume. Lastly, Jong-in walked. He wore a goldish brown and white suit with a flowing red cape and a set of 8 rings. Everyone knew that Jong-in's grandparents were old school people, so wearing a suit was his way of paying tribute to them. Taeshik glanced at his watch before nodding his head. Good, you've all quickly changed in 10 minutes, that's a good start, now follow me, said Taeshik as the 4 teens followed without complaint. After being led outside, a black SUV car pulled over in front of them as the teens looked at Taeshik incredulously, who just smirked. You didn't really expect us to always have you ride a bus, do you? Now hop on, said Taeshik as he took the front passenger seat next to the driver while the teens took the back seat, finding a lot of things which include cold drinks and a TV. Surprisingly, the back seat looked more like a sofa rather than a chair, but they were able to all fit in despite being 4, although Hae-in had taken advantage of this to be much more closer to Izuku, secretly enjoying his intoxicating scent, as Izuku was the only person that didn't smell foul to her. The SUV started to move, immediately heading towards the location. Sir, what do we expect to encounter in an E-rank dungeon? Asked Jong-in, taking the situation seriously. Taeshik pondered for a few seconds. Usually E-rank gates have low-rank monsters like goblins. They're extremely weak, and their intelligence is that of a 5 years old, but their strength lies in numbers. Think of it like having a child wield a knife. Regardless of how inexperienced he is with said knife, he could still hurt and even kill someone, said Taeshik, although referring to goblins as children was not the best way to describe it because an image was already formed in their minds. I know that the gate is extremely low rank compared to what you have been training for the last 2 months, but at this point, gates are quite rare to find these days due to it being a new phenomenon, but our scientists estimate that after 9 months the gates will be much more high rank, and at this point, its existence will be revealed to the world because we're already struggling to keep those gates' existence a secret, said Taeshik as Izuku let out a sigh. I guess the hunter profession will be also revealed to the world. This is like a repeat of the hero system all over again, said Izuku as Hae-in looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? Asked Hae-in, obviously confused as Izuku patted her head much to her delight. Back then the hero profession was not really accepted by the populace, as people believed that everything should be handled by the police and military, so discrimination back then was more common, as hero students were harassed daily in streets, with the goal of having them fall under pressure, said Izuku as everyone eye widened. Taeshik nodded slightly. That is a possibility, but unlike before when the hero profession was introduced out of the blue, we're preparing you to clear dungeons, and by the end of the 9 months your files will state all of your achievements so far. That will stop any discrimination to happen, because you would have proven yourself to the public, and the fact that you're protecting Japan from the shadow would put you in a better light among the older generation and younger generation, said Taeshik much to the displeasure of Izuku. Great, paparazzis, said Izuku as the others chuckled slightly, knowing that they will be thrusted into the limelight. We're here, sir, was the voice of the chauffeur, who was secretly an agent working for the government. Great, all of you get out, said Taeshik as the 4 teens nodded their heads and got out of the car, revealing the sunlight hitting their faces, but remained unbothered as they walked towards the abandoned school. Luckily there were no passerby. The school was obviously guarded by agents as they made way for the 4 teens and Taeshik to walk inside the building. It was obvious that the building was being renovated because new equipment was seen on the ground wrapped around its plastic bags. They walked slowly before they stood in front of a blue gate. It was as big as a large door as Taeshik turned towards the team. Are you all ready for this mission? Asked Taeshik as everyone checked their equipment and took a few breaths, knowing that this was their 2nd dungeon, and for Izuku it was his 3rd dungeon. Seeing them ready, Taeshik was the first to walk inside the dungeon as he was the leader, and the rest followed him as Hae-in, Jong-in and Beek were slightly overwhelmed by entering the gate, since it was a new feeling. As for Izuku, he was used to it. Looking at their surrounding area, they were quite mesmerized at seeing the inside of the dungeon much clearer than the first time, as it looked like the inside of a cave. Focus, said Taeshik as the 3 teens broke out of their stupor as they looked at their leader, while Izuku was focused on the dungeon. Here is what is going to happen. I will be walking behind you 4 and observing you. I won't interfere unless you're in danger, but I doubt this will be a problem for you as goblins are E rank, said Taeshik as the 4 teens nodded their heads. Their walk was quiet, but suddenly from behind a small rock a green dwarf-like monster with childlike physiques, green skin, sharp ears and teeth, and glowing red eyes, jumped with a scream as he tried to attack Heian. The appearance of the dwarf startled Heian as she almost froze in her place, but quickly regained herself as she quickly drew her sword, decapitating the green creature, killing it. Everyone was obviously taken aback, even Izuku himself was surprised by its appearance as he only went against Werewolf and Blue Venom Fang Kasaka, who were more into frontal attacks rather than sneak attacks. Obviously killing was still foreign for Heian, and seeing the decapitated goblin releasing green liquid from his missing stump made her cover her mouth in order to suppress her desire to vomit, but a hand on her shoulder and a comforting smile from Izuku made her get back her bearings. Don't worry, you've done well, you will eventually get numb to the idea of killing. Just remember that if you didn't kill the goblin he would have killed you instead. Inside this dungeon, it's all about the survival of the fittest, and we need to be stronger together and have each other back," said Izuku, managed to motivate Heian and by extension the others. "He's a natural born leader," thought Teshik as his lips twitched into a smile as he watched as the 14s continued advancing more on guard than before. It was obvious after the first surprise goblin attack the 14s were more on guard and were no longer surprised when their numbers started to increase the more they went further. Beak had put his new set of golden claws into good use as he slashed goblins into pieces. His animalistic side that came with his abilities made him handle the killing much better than the other two. Jongin was also handling it better as well as he torched the goblins and used a few offensive spells when their numbers increased, incinerating them, although it was obvious that offensive spells were still quite draining on his mana. Heian had gotten comfortable in killing the goblins after a few of her kills, as she didn't hesitate to slash them to pieces using her swordsmanship, as she used an effective way in killing the goblins through decapitation and any other means that could end life quickly. All in all, she was doing better compared to her two other teammates, as she didn't suffer much of mana depletion. Izuku was obviously using his daggers to kill goblins as he killed with no hesitation and sliced them, which activated both skills, which were paralyze and bleed, which left the goblins to die a painful death as the poison slowly killed them. They finally arrived into the boss chamber to see a much larger goblin with red skin, but a slash to the throat from Izuku dagger, which paralyzed the goblin boss and Beak crippling both his arms, along with Heian decapitating him and lastly Jongin incinerating the body. Teshiku was leaning on the wall next to the boss chamber door, had his hands folded with a smirk. They work well together and they effectively eliminated the dungeon boss, even though one of them could have taken care of him, especially Midoriya's interesting daggers ability. Thought Teshik as his eyes lingered slightly on the daggers before his eyes shifted towards the bag that he was carrying. Obviously he had been collecting the mana crystals inside the dungeon in order to be sold, and it's where their salary would come from and how they're able to build a lot of the high-tech facilities. "Now let's go. Once the dungeon boss is eliminated the dungeon will close. Let's leave quickly," said Teshik as the 14s nodded their heads as they all rushed outside the dungeon before they returned back to the school as they watched the gate shrink until it disappeared. Teshik then turned towards the 14s who had finally dropped her guard down. "Good job, the four of you have done splendidly, even though some of you froze from the beginning, but that is a normal reaction, considering you're still new to the profession. You're going to be escorted back to our facility to rest and enjoy the rest of the day," said Teshik as the group nodded their head. Chapter 6. Celebration and Confession. Completing the first officially ranked dungeon together was an overwhelming experience, and in a good way. Even if they had to kill in the dungeon, they were able to swallow it much better, since the goblins were only monsters and not human life. They knew that this was a taste of what they will be facing in the future, but instead of E-ranked dungeon, it will be D-ranked dungeon, which will increase every time they get stronger, and they all knew that they will encounter more than just goblins in the future. Now they're all sitting comfortably on the sofa after they have returned and changed into much more comfortable clothes. "We should celebrate today's achievement," said Beak as he broke the silence and everyone looked at him. "What? We've completed our first dungeon together as a team even if we had to kill. Each of us knew that life was not fair, besides we've taken our first step into protecting Japan from the monsters of the dungeon," said Beak as the other smiled. "You're right, celebrating could ease some of the tension that was built from the dungeon," said Izuku as Beak grinned seeing someone agreeing with him, and Jongin nodded. "Well, I can't say I'm against celebrating," said Jongin with a smile on his face as Beak threw his arm around Jongin's shoulder, picking him up on his feet. "Let's go raid the kitchen fridge," said Beak enthusiastically as Jongin was dragged towards the kitchen, not before giving a wink to both Izuku and Heian, who understood what this was about. Izuku's eyes shifted to the blushing Heian and was slightly concerned for her, but didn't show it because it would be disrespectful on his part if he pitied her. He knew that Beak had taken Jongin to leave him and Heian comfortable enough to confess their feelings, and while he didn't have experience in dating others or ever understood how women's minds worked, he had decided to follow his heart. He stood up before he took a seat next to her and brought the blonde girl into a hug as her head rested on his chest and his chin was resting on the top of her head. Heian's face turned extremely red, but feeling the smell of his mana enter her nose made her wrap her arms tightly around his waist as she drowned herself with the intoxicating scent of her crush. "How are you feeling, Heian?" asked Izuku with a caring voice as the girl broke out of her stupor to look at him with a blush. I'm fine, really," said Heian, although her stutter came to life due to how close they were to each other and found her lips twitching in desire. Izuku wasn't a love expert and neither was Heian. As such, he didn't know how to come out with his feelings, but he only knew of a way to do it and it was quite straightforward. He brought his right arm to her right cheeks before he pulled her into a deep kiss in the lips, which surprised Heian quite a lot, but found herself melting in the passionate kiss as she kissed back, her arms wrapped tightly around his neck. She loved the feelings of her lips connecting with Izuku, adding with his mana scent made it even more better as she wanted more as she greedily bit his lower lips, which made Izuku's mouth open. Separating from the kiss. Connecting between their mouths, she let out a content sigh as she wrapped her arms tightly around his waist. Her head was resting on his neck as she slowly placed a few kisses, sending small shivers down Izuku's spine. "So does that make us be boyfriend and girlfriend?" asked Heian with hope in her eyes as Izuku smiled. "Of course, I'm sorry if it wasn't really romantic and was quite straightforward," said Izuku as Heian beamed happily as she attacked his lips with her own, quite happy to say the least, as a single lone tear fell from her eyes. "No, I think it's special and unique. Not many people can be this straightforward, besides I really loved it," said Heian quite happily as Izuku smiled as he let the girl straddle him. Seeing her exposed neck, Izuku decided to also show his appreciation by planting a few butterfly kisses on her bare neck, making her shiver in pleasure. "It's about time you two got together, it was really hard to watch you two trying to confess," said Beak as he brought the food for the celebration. "Congratulations to you two," said Jong-in as he held the whiskey as the newly coupled rubbed the back of their head in embarrassment, but grateful nonetheless. "Man, I can't really wait until those 9 months are over," said Beak as he started drinking with vigor, and everyone couldn't help but agree. Yeah, 3 months really did pass quickly, to be honest. Back then, before reawakening, life felt like it was slow motion. Every time I opened my eyes it was torture because I had to go through the day being belittled by those I trusted. The only reason I was sane to begin with because I didn't want my mother and sister to be hurt, and at the time All Might was my idol, so I believed that just like him, I needed to smile and look at the world positively," said Izuku as everyone listened and knew that it was right as they had experienced similar things. "I sometimes wondered how I survived that long, especially how my former childhood friend told me to take a swine dive off the roof of the building and hope for a quirk in my next life," said Izuku as everyone gasped in shock. Beak was furious as he had to suppress his growl, Jong-in frowned, and Heian was angry but worried for Izuku. "That bastard, suicide baiting someone is the lowest of the low," said Beak furiously. Izuku smiled. "Don't worry about it, in a way he got what he deserved that day. When he was attacked by the sludge villain he merely survived because of All Might saving him," said Izuku, as everyone realized who Izuku was talking about. "You mean that ash blonde punk with that mean look on his face?" asked Beak as Izuku nodded. "I've met those types a lot in my old school, they all have good quirks and like to pick on others weaker than them because they're jealous. They're selfish pricks who want everything for themselves, and when they see something they don't have they compensate for it by bullying others," said Heian with a frown on her face, obviously speaking from experience. Beak grinned. "I bet he is small down there in the department, he is probably acting that way in order to compensate for not being a man enough," said Beak as he cackled out loud, much to everyone's amusement and Heian's embarrassment. "I've seen it, he is small, 2 to 3 inches in fact," said Izuku with amusement as Beak bellowed out in laughter, and Jong-in chuckled in amusement as he covered his mouth with his hand in an attempt at being a dignified person. "Mo. We were supposed to celebrate our first raid, when did this topic shift to male genitals?" said Heian, although there was no heat in her words. "Oops, my bad, you're probably thinking about your Izuku-kun." Beak was cut off by Jong-in covering his mouth to stop him from saying something that will get him castrated. Beak glared at Jong-in before they all bellowed out in laughter as they started drinking. It was obvious that out of the 4 of them Izuku was the one who didn't get drunk, although nobody would know that Izuku had a system that purged the alcohol. Surprisingly, Jong-in had a high tolerance for alcohol, as being around his grandparents who were into the old classic type of alcohol made him build tolerance. Beak was obviously standing up due to his animalistic side helping purge the alcohol, but he obviously became tipsy after a few shots. Heian was not a person who drinks, so when she started drinking, it was obvious that she immediately got tipsy and started openly flirting with Izuku, letting out her inner desires, as in certain moments she had let her urges out and started making out with Izuku, with Beak obviously cheering from the sidelines. She had also revealed some of her fantasy and secret, which included her multiple photos that she took of Izuku in secret. Luckily nobody heard it, except for Izuku, who just patted her head much to her delight as she purred, imitating a cat. Overall the whole place was utter chaos as Jong-in and Beak started butting heads with each other as they argued over who had a high kill count in the E-rank dungeon, which the conversation shifted quickly to who had the best ability and skills. At this point, Izuku knew they were on the verge of beating each other up. Izuku then imagined himself drunk and then let out an involuntary shiver as he knew that he would have accidentally killed everyone in the room by accident. I guess having the system purge the alcohol was a good idea, thought Izuku as he ran his fingers through Heian blonde hair, who was sucking on his neck, determined to leave her love mark on his neck and ensure that all girls knows that she had claimed him as hers. Izuku didn't really mind, his only concern would be his mother finding his hickey. She would probably interrogate him or probably feign thinking that he has been doing illegal things. His sister will probably tease him to death, and in school, those annoying parasites called fangirls will probably start a riot, and let's not forget about Bakugo, that guy will throw a hissy fit like the bitch he is. But just like they say, enjoy the moment and worry about the future for later, so he is going to enjoy his moment of being a teenager and then deal with the backlash for later. Looking at Heian, the girl had already fallen unconscious in the middle of her assaulting his neck. Picking the girl up in bridal style, he went to the second floor to find her room as he opened it to find a very average room. After all, Heian wasn't like the girls in today's society. She had after all lived on her own for most of her life, so she was really indifferent to materialistic desires. In a way they shared a lot of similarity together. Inside her room was a large bed enough for 2 people to sleep in. Next to her bed was a nightstand where she usually charges her phone. On the wall was a study desk in which there was her personal computer, which had sticky notes stating important dates and reminders. There was a shelf which had books and surprisingly comic books and few posters of movies that she enjoyed. What surprised him the most was the many pictures he had taken with her in the 2 months they have been together as friends. She had obviously cherished those photos as much as he did, and just like she said in her drunken state, there were many pictures of him. He was at least glad that they were able to come out with their feelings as he tried to place the blonde girl in her bed, but she had an iron grip on him. He tried to remove it, but she was obviously not budging even in her sleep. She was stubborn. Please stay, muttered Heian in her sleep as Izuku let out a sigh, but smiled as he could see that being alone was lonely for her. He gently removed the bed cover as he slid inside with Heian still holding onto him. Once he pulled the bed cover, Heian latched onto him with both her legs and her arms. I guess I will have to come up with an excuse tomorrow for my mom, thought Izuku as he himself succumbed to sleep. It was the next day and Heian's eyelids opened as she tried to get a sense of what happened the previous day, but a weight was felt on her chest as she looked, and to her embarrassment, Izuku's face was buried in her breast. Slowly memories started surfacing back to her brain as she remembered confessing her darkest secret and how she had forced Izuku to sleep with her. She felt slightly ashamed of herself, but seeing as Izuku wasn't against it made her heart flutter with happiness. If anything, she was able to sleep much better than she ever did in her whole life. She felt safe, loved and cared for, which is more than she ever had received in her life. Izuku had accepted her even when he learned about some of her secrets, like her stalking him. She then relaxed as she snuggled more into him as she played with his black hair, and his scent was still refreshing. If only she could wake up every day to this. I hope you were able to sleep at night, Heian, came the voice of Izuku, who opened his eyes and smiled as the girl let out a yelp, but seeing his charming smile made her nod her head with a blush. Why yes, I'm sorry if I selfishly made you spend a night with me. Your mom must be worried about you, said Heian, although her tone showed slight bitterness because she knew he would eventually need to return home to his mom and sister, leaving her alone in the big house. It's fine really, I will just have to make up a story for later. Besides, I always learn to live in the moment and worry later about the consequences, and this is no different. I enjoyed my night with you, so don't feel guilty about it, said Izuku with a smile as Heian felt relieved. Izuku then leaned towards his girlfriend, catching her lips with his in a small yet passionate kiss. Now, good morning my dear beautiful girlfriend, said Izuku with a smile which did its trick as Heian beamed happily as it made her feel like they were a married couple. Good morning babe, said Heian as she smiled comfortably, resisting the urge to squeal loudly in joy. Izuku pulled the girl back to the comfort of his chest as she made sure to inhale her boyfriend's scent to prepare her for the long day that is awaiting her. Izuku heard a buzzing sound as he looked to see his phone ringing. Looking at it, and no doubt about it, the caller ID showed Mama Midoriya as he sweat dropped and started contemplating what to tell her. Picking the phone, he took a few deep breaths before answering the call. Obviously his ear was harassed the moment he answered the phone call. Izuku, Midoriya, where the hell are you? Do you know how many times I have called you last night? Shouted an enraged yet worried Inko Midoriya. Hello mom, it's nice to hear your voice on this lovely morning, said Izuku as Heian looked at Izuku weirdly. Don't lovely me Izuku Midoriya, tell me where the hell are you? Asked Inko once more. Fine, I was at a friend's house yesterday along with a few friends to celebrate his 15th birthday. Someone accidentally spiked the drinks, and we got drunk, but don't worry, the one who spiked the drinks got caught and kicked out, said Izuku with a straight face, and Heian couldn't help but feel some sort of admiration for Izuku for being able to lie with a straight face. The other side of the call was silent for a few moments, and the silence was quite unnerving for Heian, although for Izuku it was normal occurrence. I'm glad to hear you're okay my little baby. I've been so worried for you when you didn't answer my calls. I even went to the police station to file a missing child report, but told me that I have to wait 48 hours before I file one. Said Inko, making both Izuku and Heian sweat drop at the same amount of overprotectiveness. Thanks mom for your concern. Said Izuku, obviously giving his poker face as he looked at Heian, who found the whole thing wholesome yet hilarious at the same time. Okay sweetie, make sure to come back home or I will feel like I'm getting old. It's one of these days where I feel like you will come back home with a girlfriend, although I wouldn't mind having grandbabies to spoil, said Inko as she gushed at the idea of having grandbabies, not aware that in fact Izuku was dating, and Heian was a blushing mess as hit her face into Izuku's chest. Don't worry, I will be back by sunrise. I need to help my friend clean his house like a proper guest should do. Said Izuku, lying once more as Heian looked at him surprised, but he ruffled her hair and knew that she got to spend more time with him, which made her extremely happy. Of course sweetie, I'm just glad I heard your voice and that you're safe now, take care and goodbye, said Inko. Goodbye mom and take care of yourself. Said Izuku as he ended the phone call. Izuku looked at Heian. Wanna cook something together? Asked Izuku as Heian nodded her head rapidly, quite excited at the prospect of doing something every couple does together. Getting out of the bed, Heian and Izuku walked downstairs and couldn't help the giant sweat drop when they saw both Jong-in and Beak unconscious. It was obvious from first sight that they had indeed gotten into a fight while they were enjoying their sleep. Beak was lying on the kitchen counter with burned pants, revealing his boxers. As for Jong-in, he was tied upside down by his legs, and the rope reached towards the chandelier. Luckily the chandelier was made out of very strong material, although every second the rope would move right to left. Really? They already got into a fight? Said Heian, finding their rivalry extremely annoying from time to time. Izuku simply had his poker face, his mouth slightly open to watch the fascinating sight in front of him. I think we will get used to this eventually. I hope. Said Izuku as Heian nodded with a little sweat drop. That's it guys. Thanks for watching and supporting us. See you in the next part.